In today's episode of Relational Lives, we're focusing on relationship challenges that are specific to LGBTQ plus couples and individuals, areas that are often overlooked or misunderstood, even within therapeutic spaces. We're delighted today to be joined by Silva Neves, who is an award-winning psychotherapist and a specialist in psychosexual and relationship therapy. Silva brings a deeply nuanced understanding of how societal pressures, minority stress, shame, and identity intersect within queer relationships. Whether you're a therapist, part of the LGBTQ plus community, or simply wanting to deepen your understanding, this episode offers thoughtful insights and practical reflections.
Welcome to the Relational Lives podcast. I'm Ali.
And I'm Roz.
And we're both psychotherapists.
This is a podcast about the complexities of relationships and how trauma, attachment, and lived experience shape how we love and connect.
Because relationships are rarely simple, and we want to give you the understanding to unlock your relationship's full potential.
If you enjoy this show, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe on whatever platform you are listening on. This also means you'll get notified when new episodes come out.
And we enjoy engaging with our listeners, so do reach out with your comments, or you can email us at relationallives@gmail.com. Welcome, Silva. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We are very excited to hear from you and for you to share your wisdom and experience and knowledge with everyone.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Absolutely welcome. So maybe you could start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this area of work.
Sure, yes. My name is Silva. I'm a psychosexual and relationship psychotherapist. And I originally trained as a generic psychotherapist many years ago. And when I trained, by the end of the training, I felt still quite inadequate to work with relationships and with people's sex lives because there was just hardly any modules on it. In fact, there was no modules on sex specifically, maybe one very short one on sexual orientations, and that was like put into the special population kind of weekend with, everything else that is other than, abled, heterosexual, white, cisgender, monogamous people. So I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't enough on sex and relationship, really, because that's always been an area of interest for me. And also working with relationship, there was maybe one weekend on couples therapy, and I thought that was just really not enough as well. So then I retrained, did a postgraduate training in psychosexual and relationship therapy. That was another 2-year training. And then that became my home. And I've just been doing that ever since, and I love it. And then I did further training in trauma therapy, and I felt trauma therapy really complemented sex therapy and relationship therapy. So, and here I am.
I was just thinking, I don't think there was anything about sex in my original training either.
No, mine was very, very limited. I mean, like you say, it's sort of one day, maybe one tiny, little module on it, not enough at all.
No.
And I think that's what we've found, haven't we, Ali? Kind of wanting to, do more to understand, and especially, like you say, also with couples, Silva, that, we've gone on and done trainings with couples therapy because it just wasn't enough before. So I think that's a really important point you've made.
Yes, that's right. And I'm hearing that it is still the case now, even in the training that we have done years ago. Now the people entering training today, they're also saying the same thing. There's still just not enough on sexual diversity, on sex lives, and on relationships, unfortunately. So, and that's why I'm really loving doing podcasts and training and publications to kind of try to help the field with the knowledge in that area that's still quite not so well done in generic training.
Yes, absolutely. And we can put some links, to those people who might find, is it just for practitioners on the whole that you write for, or is it also for the general public, as it were?
Practitioners mostly, but I tend to write in really kind of easy language anyway. I don't use a lot of jargon, so the public can read it. I've had a few feedback from members of the public reading my books, and they've said, "Oh, that makes sense. I could read it, even though it's for practitioners." But it is the primary audience is practitioners.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, we'll put the links in, and also obviously put in the links to your website and things, because I'm sure there's loads of information on there that can help people.
And maybe then you need to do another book for the general public.
Yes, I know. That's what my colleagues keep telling me. Okay.
We keep you busy.
I don't know where you find the time, because you seem to be a prolific writer.
I love it. I just love writing.
Do
So
you?
for me, it comes easy because I love it. I can just every Friday morning, that's my writing time, and I just bring some nice coffee, and then I can just write for 3 hours nonstop, and I can write quite a lot. So. And then the following Friday, I delete everything and I start again. But I just I just love writing. I just love it. It's one of my passions. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're clearly very good at it. So, can you tell us, in your experience, Silva, with LGBTQ plus relationships, what do you think that they face that's maybe missed in mainstream relationship therapy?
Well, they face a lot of oppression and discrimination. And even now in 2026 in the UK, people are still not feeling safe in the streets if they hold the hands of their same-sex partner. And something just that simple gesture of holding your partner's hands. If you are heterosexual, you can do that without really worrying about what's going on. You can do that pretty much anywhere, and it's a normal, non-meaning gesture almost. It's like an everyday thing.
Yeah.
But for us in LGBTQ relationships, it's hard because you have to scan the environment first. You've got to make sure that it is fairly safe. And I have to say, there's not many streets in the UK where I feel safe holding my husband's hand. I'm very safe doing that in London, Soho, for example. Not all London streets even, but Soho is fine,
Okay.
and a few areas in the UK. But other than that, most of the time, I'd rather not, because you just don't know what could be the consequences, and often you'll be getting abused. I mean, in severe cases, people are actually beaten up and severely physically assaulted. But you could also be spat at. You could be, name calling, and that's just that's going on. And unfortunately, those kind of things are increasing because right now, with the different political forces that are normalizing being homophobic and biphobic and transphobic, so people feel more okay than even 2 or 3 years ago to just throw some abuse at someone else.
Have you noticed that?
Hmm.
Have you experienced that, Silva?
Yes, I have. Yes,
Yeah.
I've experienced that myself, and many of my clients are telling me about it, and some colleagues as well have experienced that. So yeah, it is happening.
Yeah, I've heard people saying that even in their own home, they're afraid to cuddle on the sofa if there's a window, and someone might walk past.
That's right. Yes, and so any kind of visibility really can be difficult. And sometimes even if I'm on my own, walking down the street, I'm just paying attention to what I'm wearing, because there are some areas where I feel I can wear anything. I love wearing pink, and I can wear bright pink if I'm in Soho. But if I'm walking in some other streets that I don't know so well in the UK, I'm not so sure that I would want to wear the same top. So it's an ongoing kind of danger assessment, basically.
Yes.
And for us, it's the everyday for us. So it's almost like it's so much part of life. So it's not even conscious. We just do it. We scan the environment on a regular basis, and we do it all the time. And that is it. Actually, it is part of minority stress, but we don't even call it that anymore, because it's our everyday reality. So
Yeah.
So
there's constantly a sort of hypervigilance that's going on, which you don't even notice as a hypervigilance in a way, because you're so used to having to do it.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And then there are other things, when we're invited at weddings or heterosexual weddings, and, there's a table and there's me and my husband there, and some people can look, and sometimes people, what I find that's quite common is that sometimes people think it's okay to ask us some very private questions about what we do in the bedroom, the kind of questions that they wouldn't ask their heterosexual friends. And it's, I mean, sometimes I don't mind if it's about, educating people and telling people about our lives and for expanding awareness, but sometimes it's not really curiosity, it's just nosiness. And I think there's a difference between being curious and being nosy for their own entertainment type things. And I think it's not that people are trying to intentionally make us feel uncomfortable, but it does happen quite on a regular basis, those kind of inappropriate questions, really. And so it's one of those things. And then other things like, for example, if I want to travel to a sunny place, I always check a website that tells me what are the laws in that country. Because there are 65 countries in the world that have anti-gay laws, and 12 of them impose the death penalty for people like me. So it's not like we can just pick any sunny destinations. We look at the laws first, and because those laws change as well, countries sometimes go more homophobic, some less homophobic. So we have to keep in touch with that. And again, it's something that heterosexual people don't have to do. One of my friends, just went to that was before the Iran war, went to Dubai, and because she could, and there was no problem. For me, it is a country that has the death penalty, so I'd rather not be there.
And even within countries, different areas were going to be more accepting and less accepting, aren't they?
Yes, that's right. And we've seen here in the UK, with the latest election, there are some councils that are now are governed by the political party that wants us banned. And so it's not great. You've got to look at that as well in the more local areas. You're absolutely right. Yes. And I've seen some Italian friends last week, and my Italian friends were saying that in Italy the government has just banned the pride flag, for example. So things are things are happening.
So they're getting worse. In a way, I guess it sounds like there's if I think of the past and how it was so blatant, well, the discrimination's blatant now, but how it was, and then the illegality that was in this country, and then moving away from that the criminalization to a place where hopefully people are becoming more accepting and whatever. But it sounds like it's almost going backwards.
It is
rather than forwards.
That's right. And, there's going to be ebbs and flows. And at the moment, we're on the low ebb. And but, the hope is that things will change again, So we just have to keep the hope.
Do you hold on to that hope?
Oh, yes. I hold on to the hope. But also, at the same time, I'm just looking at other places that I can go to. It's the first time in my life when I'm actually thinking, the UK might be dangerous for me, depending on who's in power in the next election. So I'm actually looking at, because I've got the privilege of having a European passport. It means that I'm actually looking at where else could I go that might feel safer than the UK, depending on the next election. So we are at the moment in this space where we do have to think about this. Unfortunately, I never thought I would ever think of that when I first arrived in the UK 20 plus years ago, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's sickening and saddening. It's just horrible, isn't it? I find it really hard. I think it's frightening for lots of us in lots of different ways now, with the political climate as it is in this country and in other countries, with the things that are going on. But when I think of what you're saying, where there has been such discrimination and continues to be in the way that it is, that fear that must come alongside, like you say, it's something that you have to survey and be hypervigilant of all the time. It sickens and saddens me to my core.
Sure, but I think it's not great for women either when you have those political forces, and I think this is why LGBTQ people, especially gay men and women, have a special kinship, because we tend to have similar oppression in some ways, in different ways. And so, those political forces that tend to be anti-LGBTQ, they also tend to be anti-women, and they tend to be like anti-abortion and anti-women's rights. And so in some ways, when we vote when people vote for a political party to say, for example, against immigrants or against LGBTQ, they're actually also voting against lots of other people, and they might not be
For
aware of
sure.
it. And so
That's such a good point.
yeah, so it's actually really quite dangerous for a lot of us, really. And so that's why we have to be on happy vigilance. You know, a lot of things about, for example, for gay men, a lot of things that is part of the homophobia is people just disagreeing about what we do in the bedroom, right? And but women have always been also criticized with their choices about their sexuality, the choices about what they wear, the choices about who they are, the choices about the decisions that they want to make in their lives in terms of their relationships, their reproductive rights, um, and and it's the same for gay men. So there is some similarities in some ways in the societal oppression, and I think that's why we get on well. A lot of the icons in the LGBTQ world, in the disco world, are women, you know, because and women that are, you know, super colorful
Flamboyant.
and vibrant and flamboyant, and that's what we love, because we can recognize a similar joy in existing.
Which is really important as well, isn't it? That real joy that you're talking about. It seems such a vital balance, or something to come into, I don't know, I can't even say counteract because it's too big what goes on with discrimination, but to have something like you were talking about with the hope, you know, that connection to that joy and hope.
Yeah, I think we should not forget the joy, because that's when the oppression wins, really. You know, if we become miserable and joyless, and even though the world is pretty miserable right now, we have to still preserve that for ourselves, because that's one thing that we do so well. And
Absolutely, yeah.
and within that, there is, you know, the concept of chosen family is really important, and that's really about really having the people around us that are make us feel just accepted as we are. We don't have to edit ourselves. We don't have to be careful with what we wear, how we say things, how we walk, because it's fully accepted. And you don't need that many. You could need maybe even two, three people that are part of your family of choice is enough to create amongst us the joy of sharing our lives and living. And that's really,
and
really
being
important.
able to be your authentic self, ultimately, isn't it? It's being able to celebrate just who you are.
That's right, absolutely. And that goes within the LGBTQ plus communities, but also with our heterosexual allies, because there are plenty of them. It's important that we remember them. And in my family of choice, I've got quite a few heterosexual allies that I'm very grateful for.
Lovely. On the note of chosen family, well, it's kind of linked, but also how families are with other family members who might be LGBTQ plus. What do you notice the impact can be on? It's a bit. I'm not sure I'm asking the question right. Hopefully, I am, but on the relationship itself between two people or more. How does this all impact the dynamic between a couple?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it really depends on families. And when you get, say if you look at two people getting together, they come with their families. And the experiences can be so varied depending on the values of the families, or the thoughts of the families. There are some families still now, unfortunately, who reject their own sons and daughters for being LGBTQ plus, and it's still happening right now in 2026. I'm still hearing from clients who tell me that their parents said, "Oh, I'd rather you dead than gay. I could mourn you better if you were dead than gay." It's like, wow. It's quite incredible,
in this
really.
day and age. It's again another shocking thing, isn't it?
That's right. And so then it's kind of like you have to live a life with some not really kind of having the support of your family, which can be it's a big grief in itself, but it's also feeling like you're kind of alone in the world. And sometimes then you just might meet a partner, and it could be almost rescuing each other if the partner has similar and accepting families. And sometimes it can be a good thing, but sometimes it could also be that then we people can get together based on self-worth and low self-esteem and low self-worth, trauma, attachment disruptions, and because of that, sometimes they might not choose the right partner for themselves, and then a lot of obviously relational issues can happen, and that can create more woundings. But other times they can actually find someone that could be healing, and so it can go both ways. And so that is really kind of quite common, really. And that's this. So we're talking right now about families who are rejecting. And in some ways, families who are rejecting is a bit more obvious. So what you can do with that, you can help clients with the grief that maybe your family is never going to be supportive, or one of the biggest grief is to give up, that the family could be better. I mean, some families sometimes come round and they become a bit more accepting over time, but some families just do not. And that can be very, very painful. But what's less obvious, sometimes it's families who call themselves liberal, There's like families who say, sure, I accept you being LGBTQ, no problem. Bring your boyfriend, your girlfriend at home. That's totally fine. And that is good, okay? That's better than the rejection. But sometimes the subtle things that I hear often from clients will be that when they come out, they'll be saying, oh, yes, my parents were okay with it. There's no problem. My coming out was it was happened really good. But then they notice a difference in the relationship with the parents, and it's a subtle difference. For example, they notice, oh, and now they're not asking me any more questions about my dating life. Or they're not asking me any more questions about what I do on the weekend because they don't want to hear the answer. Or they're starting
they're not
to
inviting me around with my partner.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes parents can be liberal, but the clients I hear that often will perceive some different, or they will notice that something is different, even though the parents might say, sure, we accept you as you are. And the difference could be subtle. So it could be like, for example, when parents stop asking questions about their dating life, or they stop asking questions about what they do on the weekend because they just don't want to hear the answer. Or they stop being invited to parties or to family events when they are young children because they think, oh, we can't have young children with gay people, which is one of the big myths, that somehow we have an issue with young children. Or things like they will call their partner, so almost like as a gender neutral term, rather than saying boyfriend to their sons, or girlfriends to their daughter, or even husbands or wife, they'll still say partner, to make it more kind of vague. And so those things are really subtle, and often it doesn't mean that those families are homophobic. They are probably not homophobic, but they do have a discomfort around the topic that that does show up. And sometimes the discomfort is not addressed, not talked about, or the families are not willing to process what that discomfort meant for them.
Have you ever worked with families where you might even work with in these situations where you have experienced your clients having a difficulty with how their parents are with them and with their relationship? Have you ever worked in a group where you bring those people together?
No, I haven't, because I'm not a family therapist. And so if people want family therapy, I would refer to people who are trained in family therapy. But I do hear a lot about families, obviously, in my work with individual work, or in couples therapy or relationship therapy. Definitely. I did work once with, it was basically a son and his mother. And it was like, but it was still just two people.
Yeah. There seems to be like an area which could be so helpful, doesn't it? That, trying to bring people together to help people understand and connect differently into the way that they are. Because it must be so hard either way, when you talk about the sort of more subtle experiences within families, or the more overt, where they're just sort of cut off with those awful things being said. All of it must be so hard for the adult child.
Of course, because it's a major attachment disruption.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it can take a long time to heal that and to then be able to step into another relationship system, whether it's the family of choice that we were talking about earlier, or a relationship, or a polycule, people in polyamorous relationships. To do that from a place of um, from a place of good self-esteem, you've got to be able somehow to have healed some of your attachment disruptions, to think that you can trust other people, because some people go into relationships still with the idea, with the mindset that no one's going to show up for them, that they're all alone in the world, that they have only them to fend off against the world. And so even if they are in relationships, often they might not trust that their partner will be there for them, or their partners will have their back. And so they can be in a relationship and still feel alone.
Yeah.
And that can be very
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah, we would sometimes call that a raw spot within you. Like you have a raw spot around not being seen or accepted. So there's any slight inkling that the partner is not seeing you as good enough or accepting you is going to set that alarm off and bring all that past trauma alive again.
Absolutely. Yes, that's right. And of course, the other partner is also likely to have had some history of homophobia and family issues and parents. And so, of course, the partner can't always be attentive. Sometimes they have their own issues as well. And so when there are two stories of attachment wounding happening in the same relationship, that can be very complicated to disentangle all of this. And so that's when therapy is really helpful.
Yeah. And even things like with some of the couples I've worked with, same-sex couples, where one is wanting to be like, I don't care, fuck the world, I'm going to hold your hand. And the other is, no, that doesn't feel okay. And that can be a source of conflict, can't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's it's quite common actually that there will be, and actually with that it's sometimes it's the person that says, "Oh, I don't care, I will do this." It could be because it could come from a good place. It could come from a place of, you know what, we're gonna use ourselves to be political here and to just really uh, take on the world. And I think, good for you. That's great. But sometimes it could also be a trauma effect where people just don't pick up the danger, don't pick up the threat.
Yeah, okay.
And then that can be, and then they can put themselves in actual danger. And we see that every weekend, like with the people I follow on social media, there are people who take pictures of themselves with big bruises and broken noses because they get attacked. They come out of their LGBTQ clubs and they get attacked in the streets. And so, and it's obviously not always because they don't pick up the danger, but there is danger out there.
There is a
And
real thing,
so, yeah. And
so you have to be on high alert. You cannot not be on high alert. You must be having to have surveillance of your environment. And is that something that comes into your work, that you're helping couples when there perhaps is trauma from their backgrounds, that they're bringing into relationship with who they're with currently, and that they then have to learn sometimes around making sure they are safe? Is that something that you would work with?
Yes, and it is a very fine line because you definitely want to work with, we've got to live our lives, okay? We can't just be afraid all the time. So yes, great if you can be out there, we're wearing the t-shirt that you want to wear, going to the clubs you want to wear, holding the hands of your partner, kissing even in the streets, just be yourself, and you got to live life. We can't just stay oppressed. And at the same time, still scan your environment, still make sure that you're not exposing yourself to an imminent threat that might just be right there. And so, it's a very, very tricky line, and we don't always get it right, obviously. But I think it's important to hold both, to hold the vigilance. We need to have the vigilance because, people out there do want us to disappear. They do want us dead. Unfortunately, it's the harsh reality. But also to create a space where, if there's more than just two people, if you're like in a bigger group, less likely to be attacked, for example. And so, and with that, you can just really have a lot of good time, a lot of fun. And so, but it's really managing both, and that's not always easy.
Yeah.
And I imagine that that's where also it's really important in your work, I mean, in the work that we all do in terms of trauma, that by working through and understanding and dealing with the trauma more, I guess then there is more of a balance of that, rather than when you said, sometimes it's going out because there's not that work that's been done in terms of the original trauma, and so therefore putting maybe more at risk. But that seems to me to be so key, is that once you've then worked through some of that and helped people work through some of that in their relationships and with themselves, that they can then maybe understand that balance a little bit more, perhaps. I don't know whether that's right.
Yes, that's right. And of course, right now I'm talking from the privilege of being in London and working with clients who are in London, or, there are some cities in the UK, like Brighton, for example, is the LGBTQ plus capital, we're told. Manchester, there's lots of really great places. There's a fabulous gay village. But there are some LGBTQ people who are living in areas where there's just no places that is safe. People in small village or small communities where they might not even have anyone that identifies as LGBTQ anywhere near them. And so that can be very, very oppressive. And that's when the online world can be a lifeline for people like this. And so in my time, when I grew up, there was no internet. Very isolating. And now I'm just so grateful that there are some LGBTQ people living in rural areas who can have online. And online, of course, just like real life, there are some good places, there are some dangerous places. And it's, again, how to navigate the online spaces. I wish we had more conversations about that too, because that can be tricky as well.
So you are a psychosexual counselor, therapist.
Yes.
So you also look at the sexual side of a relationship.
That's right.
What would you say about the specific difficulties that can show up in an LGBTQ plus relationship and their sexual world?
Trauma and shame basically are the two very, very big, most common things that can just get in the way of a good sex life for LGBTQ plus couples or relationships.
Okay.
And so trauma could be like we've just talked about, a trauma of, like, say, for example, someone who has a history of being beaten up a lot in some bullying, for example. They could just keep that into their bodies, and the nervous system can be overloaded. And in order to have sex, in order to have good sex, the nervous system has to be fairly relaxed. We have to be able to trust our partner. When we take our clothes off, it's a very vulnerable moment. And, and in that moment, we could have someone with a history of trauma could have a lot of anxiety and even some PTSD kind of reactions. They could go numb. They could dissociate. They can have some flashbacks. And so that can be very difficult, obviously. And so that's one area. But the other area that's also very, very common is shame. And shame is basically the message that says, you're bad, you're wrong, you're worthless, you should not exist. And that message obviously comes from society and comes from homophobia and comes from all the dominant narrative that we hear that prioritizes heterosexuality and monogamy. And so, and in some cases, with a lot of clients, of course, there is the, as we were just talking about, the family who will just reject them outright. A lot of people have grown up in families with high religiosity, and some religious beliefs are that LGBTQ people are an abomination, should not exist. Not all religion, of course, or not every religious people, but it is quite common that people with high religiosity will have a problem with their LGBTQ sons, daughters, children, siblings. And so, and some people just keep that inside, even if on the intellectual level, they might say, I'm out, I'm proud now, I don't live with my parents anymore, I don't take on that religious beliefs anymore, I have lots of friends, I go to clubs. Underneath, subconsciously, they can still keep that shame message that says, you're bad, you're wrong, you're worthless, you should not exist. And when we go into the area of intimacy and when we want to connect really meaningfully, heart to heart with another person, intellectually we might think, of course, yes, it's safe. I fancy them, they fancy me. We're here to be intimate. But then there's the shame part that pulls the strings and says, but you are worthless anyway. What, that person's not gonna love you. Nobody can love you. You're unlovable, and that will get in the way. So then what happened is that a lot of people really want to connect heart to heart, but they connect with shields because they don't want to let go of the shield because they're just afraid that if the shield goes down, they will just get hurt or that they will be unlovable.
You will see this horrible side to me that I've deeply hidden.
Right, exactly. And when you connect shield to shield, obviously you're not connecting authentically, and then a lot of issues, sexual issues and relational issues can occur.
I like the way you've described that. Yeah, connecting.
Yeah, it's a good image, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. You're not connecting heart to heart. You are connecting through some kind of protection. Well, you're not even connecting, are you?
No.
Right.
But the desire is there to connect. The wish and the want is there to connect.
Absolutely.
But those protections have to come up because of that history, familiarity. Yeah, that's being activated.
I'm just thinking also about the shame that can come through people's sexual preferences.
Yes, absolutely. Because, there's lots of sexual preferences and even like with sexual orientations, it's really, really, really wide, isn't it? The diversity. It's not just gay, bisexual, straight, it's like there's so much of a spectrum around all of this. And sexuality sometimes is fluid. And so a lot of people do identify with different sexual orientations over the years. And then there are more words and more terms that can describe what you are feeling more than even we had 5 years ago. And then within all of that, as part of the sexual orientations, there are people who are into kinky stuff, fetish stuff. Some people that are definitely not into monogamy, other people that really thrive in polyamory, and on and on and on. That's such a wide range. And all of those can be shamed by society or from the family who tells them that they are wrong to want this or they're wrong to feel attracted by that. So there's a lot of shame if you're not fitting in the tight box.
And even some people don't want to even acknowledge it to themselves, I think. Yeah, that can be a thing, can't it? Like, I know I'm attracted to this. This turns me on. It shouldn't turn me on. I'm going to push it aside and try and just be, I don't know, normal.
Yeah, that's right. And that's for LGBTQ people, and that's for heterosexual people too, because there are some heterosexual people who are kinky, who are feeling afraid to be able to be honest to themselves and to others. And that's the great privilege of a sex therapist, is that often we are the first people when clients are taking the courage to say out loud, I'm turned on by stilettos, for example. I'm turned on by, I've got a foot fetish, and they will be saying for the first time to another human being, and often it will be a sex therapist. And so this is
a human being who is not shaming them, who is completely non-judgmental. And I think that's so key, isn't it? It's who are they saying it to, in the way that that's being received? How are they being received?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish that could be all of us, really, as a sex therapist, because we are kind of trained to talk about sex all the time. But actually, I hear for so many clients to say, my previous therapist was a great therapist. We did a lot of trauma work. We did lots of relational work. We did a lot of things. But I'm coming to you to talk about sex because I could not talk about sex with my previous therapist. And I found that so sad, because if they've had a really good therapeutic relationship with the previous therapist, they should be able to talk about sex as well.
Of course.
So this is one of my things that I'm just really loving to teach all therapists. We don't need to be a sex therapist to talk about sex. All of us can talk about sex.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree
with it.
Yeah. So are there any sort of particular strengths in LGBTQ plus relationships that are sometimes overlooked? do you think?
For sure, yes. I think one of the strengths of LGBTQ plus relationship is that because we've always been outcasted and being outside of the dominant narrative, it means that we are a lot more creative with how we live our lives, with how we create our relationships. And so it means that from the beginning, it's so much easier if you're with an LGBTQ partner to really talk about, do we want to be the monogamous or do we not want to be? What's your kink? What's your turned on by? Those conversations are a lot more fluid, a lot more common from the beginning. Whereas with heterosexual people, they have a lot of pressure to just really conform to the dominant narrative, to say, okay, so we date and then we just take off our profiles on Tinder, then we're moving together, then we're going to have to think about marriage and then have to think about babies and
We forgot
even
the dog.
and the dog, of course, the dog. Yes, that's right. And with that, some LGBTQ people want to choose that path as well, but actually, that from the beginning, there's a lot more creativity on how we want to do things, and in terms of families, that shows up in research that LGBTQ parents are actually really, really, really good parents because there is no unwanted pregnancies in LGBTQ families. It's very, very wanted.
Yeah.
And so, and there's a
Lovely
lot
way
of,
to start a
yes,
life.
exactly. And there's a lot of preparation. And so actually children of LGBTQ people tend to fare really well. But out there, it's still demonized, and LGBTQ people having children, unfortunately. Yeah.
There's such a contrast in what you're saying. I'm thinking, that lovely freedom in a way that you're talking about, that, in heterosexual paths is more limited, if you like, and contained and rigid, perhaps in some instances, and yet having so much discrimination still, and all the things that you've talked about that are having to be contended with in society, and in different societies and in different parts of society. What a contrast in what you've just said.
Yes, and I think
in terms of that freedom.
Yeah, of course, there is a lot of freedom within all the oppression around us. There is a lot of freedom, within the LGBTQ communities. But another thing I love about it is that we have such a good place in the overall society, because all the conversations of consent that now everyone is having, like heterosexual people are having, actually comes from the BDSM communities and the kink communities, because that's always been very embedded in the BDSM culture. And now it's becoming mainstream because we've taught heterosexual people and vanilla people on how to have explicit conversations about consent. So it's
That's such a good point.
It's one of the things that we do. A lot of young heterosexual people now are a lot more well versed with polyamory and open relationships, and also because now there is a model, the model of the LGBTQ communities, and so we do provide new narratives now for younger people now on conducting their lives more with freedom. Same thing with women. A lot of women feel so much pressure to just have children, but some women don't want to have children. Some women are not maternal, and that is also demonized. And so, and in some ways, to be able to say, you can live your life outside the box. You can still be heterosexual and live your life outside the box. It's fine. Look at us. We've been doing it for years, and we do it well. So I think there is, it's not just, LGBTQ populations versus heterosexual populations in the mix. There is there's a lot of cultures that we can learn from each other and cross over and teaching, and offering new ways of being human, because at the end of the day, it's about being human. And so
wouldn't it be nice if there wasn't a box?
I know.
That we could just be who we are without feeling like we've got to somehow fit into some
tick a box as well, often, isn't it? It's like having to tick boxes on any forms and whatever. It's always sort of that tick boxing thing, isn't it? Which is kind of trying to fit you into a category, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. And I've been talking to some colleagues about this, about the, why do we have this box, and why is this box so always around? And some school of thought is like, well, if we all felt freedom to live our lives really authentically as we are, with no box, but just really being really self-governing, then capitalism would fall down.
Yeah.
because capitalism relies on us not feeling good about ourselves, so we can keep purchasing things to feel better.
100%.
That's so good. That's such a good point. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's the real
would
truth.
Fall apart.
Yeah, right. And it will be a real threat to the people who wants to keep the power, because if we are self-governing, with our humanity, then maybe we're harder to control in terms of a mass control population. So I don't know. But,
that's what we all need to do. We all need to sort of move towards, we're not going to be in a box. We're not ticking the box.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And those are theories. I don't know what it is really, but definitely all the things that we believe to be true in terms of relationship rules and sexual behavior rules and all of that are just constructs.
Yeah.
They're not really often fitting with who we are as human nature.
Yeah, I love that. I look forward to your next book aimed at the general public coming out. So we could recommend.
All right. Okay, I'll take the challenge.
So to leave you kind of with one challenge as well, a question perhaps, is what is one myth about LGBTQ plus relationships that you'd most like to challenge?
The one myth is that we are prioritizing sex. Okay, I think that's a myth, because often when people look at us and our relationships, they automatically think about what we do in the bedroom, and that our lives is all about sex. And for gay men, for some reason, people are really kind of fascinated about what we do in the bedroom, and especially to do with anal sex, and they believe that we always do that and only that, and there's nothing else going on in our lives. And so and for lesbians, it's kind of like the opposite. It's like, oh, sure, they don't have sex with each other, do they really? What would they? So it's those are big myths that are still happening in 2026 for some reason. So really, I quite like to best that myth to say, actually, we are just humans like everyone else. And, I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And a lot of the time with my husband, we just watch Netflix,
Love that.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, it's so lovely, Silva, that you've come on and been with us today to talk about all of this. It's going to be so lovely. Also, because we're going to bring this out in Pride Month. We're in Pride Month now, but we're going to make sure this gets out in this month. And really, I'm really picking up, I'm sure Ali is too, on your joy. And I think that's such a lovely thing to kind of end with, really, feeling your joy and feeling it with you.
Yeah. Are you coming down to Brighton for Pride?
I love Brighton. Not this year though, because I'm doing several other prides this year. So yeah, okay. I'm gonna miss Brighton, unfortunately. Yes, but I love Brighton Pride. It's great.
Yeah, it's great.
I love Brighton.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let us know if you're ever down this way.
Sure, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. So if you can remember, everybody who's listening to this, to like, subscribe and follow. This means that more people will be able to listen to this episode with Silva as well as many others. So that would be great.
Thank you so much,
thank you so much. Yeah, it's been lovely chatting with you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much.